Hey y'all, and good now, whenever and wherever this finds you. Today we're going to be talking about disruption. What is it? How does it happen? Why does it happen? And why can't people see it coming? So let's take a look, and here we go.
In a disruption, just to be clear, is when a new product or service helps to create a new market and also either destroy or diminish the existing industry. And it's usually the experts and the insiders and the mainstream analysts who dismiss disruption. I mean, smart people, some of whom were disruptors in previous lives. But I'm going to ask and answer the question of why. So how disruption happens? Here's the result of 15 years of work. We usually have an equilibrium, whether it's societal or at the industry level. So at the industry level, for instance, we have had the car for about 100 years, and the value chain hasn't changed much. Elements have. I mean, there's been incredible technology progress, but the architecture has not changed substantially. Same thing with electricity. So we've had the power system for about 100 years, and we have swapped in coal, out nukes, in gas, and so on, but the fundamental architecture has not changed. So we have an equilibrium. Then there is a convergence of technologies. That convergence opens up a new possibility space. And think about 12 years ago, when Tesla and other companies came into the EV space and solar companies and so on. So that's when the opportunity space opened up. They come into the market, but here's something interesting. The incumbents, by which I mean the companies that dominate those markets, don't see this new possibility space. Mainstream analysts don't see that possibility space, but entrepreneurs do. So they come in, and I'll use the Tesla example, about 11 years ago. And over the following few years, they pushed the cost and capabilities until, so they enter the market and they push the capabilities until it ruptures the market. So this has happened already in both energy and transportation. So what does that mean? Rupture means the old rules don't apply anymore. The new rules may or may not be clear, but the old ones clearly don't work anymore. So we're past that rupture point in energy and transportation. And so what we have seen over the last couple of years is the shakeout that happens at that point. So there are accelerators that essentially feed back into the new technologies.
For any new technology, falling costs increase demand, which attracts more investment in production. That in turn expands supply, and expanding supply lowers costs even further. At the same time, growing demand also triggers more infrastructure investment and government support, which also increase supply. As supply expands, the technology itself improves. The public becomes more accepting of it, and network effects emerge around leading brands and platforms, all of which drive demand growth even further. So the entire process is characterized by acceleration, with each feedback loop amplifying the others in a virtuous cycle. And at the same time, growing demand for the new reduces demand for the old. Revenues for the old technology decline, which causes supply to shrink. A smaller supply means loss of economies of scale, and so costs increase. At higher costs, which translate into higher prices, demand falls. Less demand also means less profit, less investment in production and infrastructure, less government support, all of which cause supply to contract further. And that in turn reduces public acceptance and weakens network effects. And so, for incumbents, the process is also an accelerating one, where each factor catalyzes the others. But in this case, it's a vicious cycle of decline. And less demand for the old drives all the more demand for the new.
And eventually those new technologies get adopted as an S-curve, as I'm going to explain, and they become the new system, and they become the new equilibrium. So I expect that to happen in the 2030s for energy and transport. And at the same time, there is what I call market trauma, which is that the old industry collapses. So that's how disruption happens.
So that's how disruption happens, and that's what's happening now. And just like he said, the people that are in the system now, they're the last, they don't see it. We're going to get into a video here in a minute that tells you why they don't see it. But for right now, it's worth studying, because this is what's taking place right now.
So here's the question. Why do smart people at smart organizations consistently fail to anticipate or lead disruptions? And it has to do with what I said before, right? When a big opportunity space opens up, they just don't see it because they're looking through a straw. It's a linear mindset. They see the world like this, when in fact, in times of disruption, adoptions are S-curves. And one of the big mistakes that they make is the idea of what I call the faster horse syndrome, which is that, folks thought that cars were a faster horse. And so it was a one-to-one substitution. We know that was not the case, but usually folks, smart people indeed think in this way.
Now, because the rate of change is slow in the early years, it almost always takes conventional analysts and observers by surprise when disruption gets going. We have every reason to expect that this disruption of energy by solar, wind, and batteries will follow exactly this same historical pattern. The history of technology shows us that the exponential growth phase tends to continue until the new technology comprises about 75% of its global market ultimate size. Now, because most disruptions make their markets expand, this means that the new technologies often grow well beyond the size of the old system. So the reason we can be so confident that the costs of solar and wind and batteries will keep falling through the 2020s is because the global markets for these technologies will continue to grow exponentially in the decade ahead.
So he reviews here for us again, what is disruption?
So again, there's a long equilibrium. There is a convergence, which opens up a dramatically new, in many cases, possibility space. Companies, entrepreneurs rush in. The incumbents don't see it, but entrepreneurs do. After a few years, they push the cost and capability. They improve the cost and capabilities until it ruptures the system. Then there are accelerators that feed that new world. Adoption happens as S-curve. The old also collapses as inverted S-curves, and the new becomes essentially embedded and becomes the new equilibrium. And that's how disruptions happen.
So that explains how disruption happens, and it is happening now. And I know it because my friend Christopher's on a call right now, probably just sold another system or got closer to learning how to sell systems, and he's going to have a group of men with him, and that's going to lead to installers, and that's going to lead to more manufacturing, and that's going to lead to enjoying everything. And so I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you down the road.